Air Force Top Gun trophy in 1949.
Now, was it
amazing?
Was it called Top Gun back then?
Essentially, Jerry, you want to give elaboration, Brother Eddie?
Yes, it was. It was the first Air Force Top Gun competition. It was held at Nellis Air Force Base outside of Las Vegas in Nevada.
Gotcha.
And they had an all-black crew from the pilots down to the crew members who maintained the aircrafts. And it's a competition today in itself where not only pilots go out and compete, but the ground crews compete as being the best to get their aircrafts ready, to make sure they're in top shape for flight, how they do their pre-flights and how they de-flight when they come in to shut them down. So it's a good competition, and the Tuskegee Airmen distinguished themselves very well for the first time.
Now, somebody tell me, who stole the trophy?
That's a good question.
Who stole the trophy?
But the important thing is we now know where it's at, and it's on display at the Air Force Museum at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio.
Okay. Now, you guys have been busy here lately. Tell me what's going on with the airmen these days.
Well, you had asked about some of the airmen, what they're doing today, but I'd like to give you a brief synopsis of some of them that we have in our chapter right now.
Okay.
Beginning with Major L. Anderson, and that his name is not a rank. Major L. Anderson II was born in Jacksonville, Florida. He did his training at Keesler, and then he went on to Chanute for aircraft maintenance. Now, he was an enlisted Tuskegee Airman.
Okay.
He's also lives in the D.C. area right now. But he went in, he did his job. He was with the 477th Bombardment, so he never deployed overseas. And so he got out at the end of the war. He came back to D.C., and he went to Howard University, as well as the American University and the University of the District of Columbia. Major Anderson is very active in his community. He was a deacon at Third Baptist Church in Washington, D.C. As a matter of fact, he's a deacon emeritus.
Okay.
And right now they're established a maintenance academy out at BW Airport, and they named it in his honor. It's called the Major Anderson Aviation Maintenance Academy.
Okay.
Also, there's Second Lieutenant Herb Jones. Actually, when he was a cadet, he's from the Washington, D.C. He lived in the Deanwood community. Now, Mr. Jones went down and attended class at Tuskegee. He graduated, and he was assigned to bases here in the States. He didn't go overseas because the war ended, and he got out. And he came back to D.C. area, and he did some outstanding things in the area. He established... him and some friends established the first African-American owned and operated charter airline service known as the International Aviation Association. They flew out of Martin State Airport near Baltimore. They flew to the Caribbean, to Houston, to Long Island, and to Miami. They serviced a lot of the local churches and entertainers of the time. Mr. Jones also was very instrumental in helping the East Coast chapter in setting up their Youth in Aviation program. He provided facilities for them to train young people, and I tell you, our Youth in Aviation program has sponsored many young kids, helped them to learn the basics of aviation, and even up to receiving their pilot's license. Okay. A lot of them received their pilot's license before they got their driver's license.
Is that right?
That program is still active today. If you go to our website, there's information there how you can apply and respond to this. We're open to all youth in the D.C., Maryland, Virginia, Northern Virginia area. Another member of our chapter is William T. Fauntleroy Jr., also from the Washington, D.C. area. And it's funny how this is a small world because Mr. Fauntleroy and Mr. Jones actually knew each other before they entered training.
Okay.
And they worked together at the U.S. Patent Office along with their fathers. But Mr. Fauntleroy went down, flight training, and the war ended before he was finished. So he was discharged honorably from the service, and he came back. He graduated from Howard. He also went to work for the National Capital Transportation Agency, a forerunner to Washington Metropolitan Area Transportation Authority. He was hired as a traffic engineer, but he was responsible for locating many of the metro stations here in the Washington, D.C. area.
Okay.
Mr. Walter Robinson was a classmate of Mr. Fauntleroy. He was from Baltimore, Maryland. He attended Howard University for a couple years. He began his training down in Tuskegee at Keesler Field in 1943. The war ended before he was able to deploy over, and he came back to D.C. He retired from the U.S. Post Office of 35 years of service. He was the second African-American manager of delivery and collections for the Washington, D.C. area.
Okay.
And then last but not least, I would like to tell you about Mr. Carl Johnson, who retired from the United States Army. But Mr. Johnson started out in the Army Air Corps. But he was discharged in 1947 as a second lieutenant. He came back to his hometown of Ohio, and he worked for the Army National Guard. He studied to be a dentist. But when the Korean War broke out, he quickly determined he did not want to be an artillery officer, so he applied for Army Aviation. And he graduated from the Army pilot training at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. He went on to serve in Korea and Vietnam. And he retired to work full-time and was consulting positions at airports like Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Fort Lauderdale, and Boston.
Okay.
And he's now residing here in the DMV metropolitan area.
Talking live with Mr. Gabriel Christian, Mr. Jerry Burton, and Mr. Edward Harbison. And it's some black history here. Believe me, gang, some black history. These gentlemen know everything about the Tuskegee Airmen. And boy, I'm getting an earful and I'm loving it. Continue, sir. Don't stop.
We've all seen a lot lately about